What is up, and thank you for listening to yet another edition of the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. Each and every show, we dig into the ever-changing digital social marketing landscape. This show is no different, and I'm going to be bringing on the Senior Director of Marketing and Brand Engagement over at LA28. Olivia Cheng joins us on the Biz of Social podcast, and those of you that have been paid attention, you know that the Olympics 2028 are coming to LA, essentially my hometown. I grew up an hour east of Los Angeles. Obviously, diehard Laker fan, as a lot of you know. So it's about 5 years away. I'm really interested to ask her about how you market an event. And I know she got there a few years ago. So she was trying to market an event that was 7 years away from actually kicking off, and how you're able to build that audience over time and create that intimate connection with an audience and create incentives, especially as they look to go after a younger audience. And one thing they did differently that you guys have noticed out in the marketplace than any other Olympic Games, to my knowledge, is they created close to over 30 different unique logos working directly with LA artists on the A. So the LA28, the A is different across so many different pieces of collateral because they partner with over 30 original creations, original artists in the LA area. So that's a really cool way that they've kind of tried to start that younger, hipper approach, if you will, when it comes to LA28. But I want to get into it. She also spent some time at Legends, the Philadelphia 76ers. She's a brilliant marketer. I'm so excited to get into it. Here it is, Olivia Cheng, the Senior Director of Marketing and Brand Engagement at LA28.
Thanks, David. So happy to be here.
Let's hop into it. So I would love for you to kick things off. I know so much is under your umbrella as the Senior Director of Marketing and Brand Engagement for something as large as LA28 and what you guys got planned here. And shoot, I don't know, 5 years or so, but walk me through what you oversee day to day and kind of all those things.
Sure. So I joined about 2.5 years ago. So at that time, it was fantastic because I was able to say, in the next 7 years, here's what's going to happen. So predicting 7 years is really interesting of an opportunity. But my day to day is that I oversee all of our digital and social engagement, in particular to the fan. And so everything that we do, we run website, email, all the different social media channels. And it's one of the key elements for us to drive fan engagement because we have nothing to sell at this moment.
Right.
And so, for us, it's all about digital storytelling and really trying to engage fans digitally. And we interestingly launched our brand during the pandemic. And so that's the first time in itself. And so because of that, we really needed to create a digital storytelling space that makes things a lot more unique for different fans across the world to be like, hey, how is LA28 going to do this different? And so it's been a very interesting whirlwind, but that is part of what my scope is.
It's funny you say that at the very beginning, because that was one of my first questions I wanted to ask you. And I know you spent a lot of time over at Legends. You also spent time at the Philadelphia 76ers. And I bring up the Legends part because we worked with the Legends on the Snapdragon Stadium out here in San Diego. And we always joke around that we had to market a piece of dirt for 3 years, right? And like, how do you, it's an inanimate object. You don't really have a Steph Curry or anybody like that you can really latch on to. That was going to be my number one question when I knew I was going to have a chance to interview you is how do you look at the stages of marketing when you are 7 years out from such a monumental event?
So we have a pretty unique situation where we know that the Olympics is a legacy brand, right? If I ask anybody on the street, hey, have you heard about the Olympics? Everybody has some sort of experience or memory of watching the games. Maybe not so much for the Gen Z audience. And that is truly my day-to-day job nowadays is to make sure that this next generation really gets engaged in that. So because of that, that's the area of opportunity for us, right? Because we have this legacy brand and then we're anchoring everything off of it to extend that opportunity so that we can continue to connect and engage with the next generation. So that also helps because we're playing in a digital and social space. And that's where the younger audience is getting to connect with us, getting to know who we are. And so I think as we sort of continue to think about all of the key milestones that building a games happens along the way in the next 5 years, there's going to be these pivotal points where we're going to double down on it. And so one of those pivotal points will be Paris 2024. And knowing that that's going to be a key moment at that time where everybody's going to be watching the
Right.
games, we are secondary. However, we are next. And so because of that, we're leveraging that excitement of everybody tuning in. And then we're going to double down on trying to, in across all of our digital channels, paid, influencer marketing, et cetera, to really connect with the fans so that they can continue to be excited as we are the next games to follow.
It's funny you mentioned that because I'm 36, so I remember the Carrie Strug moment when I was a kid, right? I remember, obviously, even more recently, Gabby Douglas and all of the infamous stories about the '92 Dream Team. But if you're, like you just said, if you're Gen Z, if you're 12 years old right now, you don't have that to kind of fall back on. So, what have you found to be successful, whether it's nostalgic content or just the education around the power of the Olympics? I think yourself, myself, we have these like memories branded into our brain that allows us to have that positive feeling about, the Olympic rings. But we'll love to hear how you've kind of been able to reintroduce that to maybe the uninformed.
So there's a couple of different ways. My main job is to make the Olympics cool again, and I
Yeah,
know that that's a
yeah.
very tough thing to do. So we want to make sure we're culturally relevant. That's what we recognize that Gen Z really cares about, and they might tap into the food, the culture, the communities that they live around. And so making sure that one, we're representing what LA has to offer, but in a way that Gen Z is proud of, right? And so we very much want to tap into just the local community, tapping into the younger audiences, connecting with them, really being there, like in person. We're out there playing at the park, hanging out with their families, and starting those conversations so that they can know organically, like this is actually happening. And then simultaneously, we're following the trends on social. We're, not doing the TikTok challenges per se, because that wouldn't be on brand,
Yeah.
but at the same time, just being there, creating a POV that really connects with the next generation of fans. And so I think tapping into a lot of different areas that we know Gen Z cares about is what our biggest mechanism is. And then there are some really young Olympians and Paralympians. One in particular would be somebody like Sky Brown, who was 13 years old when she competed.
Yeah.
And she is an Olympic skateboarder and also medaled in Tokyo 2020. And so it seems like she might be back in Paris. And so it's going to be really exciting to have somebody who is young, who is Gen Z, and she's authentically showing how she became an Olympian and being able to help her anchor her story with LA28 because she is actually from LA as well, and then be able to expand on that and let others who might be skateboarding or might not be, but then seeing like, oh wow, like she's 13, I'm 13. Wow, like we can
Yeah.
really all play the
You
same
can
sport and
relate to
actually
that.
become an Olympian.
I think
So
one really brilliant thing you all did was with your different variations of your logo creation when it comes to local LA artists. And, we even worked with you guys on some things with the Paralympics in terms of some blind athletes and creating those logos in Braille, if you will, and kind of 3D so they can hold them and feel them and understand the difference of those different variations of logos. But it sounds like that laddered right up to your ultimate goal of like, we want to be relevant. We want to make sure the LA culture shines through.
yeah, when we sort of embarked on understanding how we want to be introduced to the world, we really wanted to focus in on creating this, what we like to call a co-creation platform. It is honestly more work for our team, but we love it because we can really use this mechanism as a way to connect with all of these, like you mentioned, artists,
Yeah.
athletes, community, tastemakers, et cetera, and have them help shape what LA is because there's not one way to represent LA. We're so uniquely diverse. There's so many
Mhm.
different cultures and different people. And I think having that co-creation platform really allows us to continue the digital storytelling that also connects with different audiences, right? And so we're really excited about it. All of them are official emblems. I think some people
How
look
many
at it
how
as
many variations of official?
right now we're around 36.
Wow.
We're adding new ones every single year. And so the goal, there's no like end goal of how many. I think the point is
There's
that
Olivia, there's
there's
art
just a,
directors across Fortune 500 that their heads are spinning right now. That
exactly.
brand guide is something else,
Oh
I'm sure.
yes, that brand guideline continues to expand.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are like, oh, this is one's my favorite, that one's, and I was like, they're all official emblems.
Yeah.
And I'm sure eventually we'll figure out how to solidify, how we're going to showcase all of the different variety of voices that
You're
it
like,
represents.
they're all my children. I love them all equally. I have no favorites. So I would love to hear. Okay, so let's like take a 10,000-foot view for a second. Maybe this started when you first started at LA28. But what does ultimate success look like? There's so many different vehicles that you can go down or roads you can go down in terms of attendance in LA when it comes to 2028, in terms of how people feel about the brand, heading into the games. There's also, I'm sure, tune in is going to be a huge part of getting people to watch. But when there's so many different, I guess, in games, is there a number one North Star that you guys are tracking towards as you think about this lead up over the next 5 years?
So if it's the ultimate like LA28 CEO answer, I'll
Right.
say that it is to make sure that we balance the books and we are fiscally responsible. And
Okay.
that's very critical for us because we are following LA84's legacy. And believe it or not, they are the last games that actually was
Mm,
financially positive for an organizing committee to actually host. And so it is important for us very much so to put on the most unique games possible, but to also make sure that we're fiscally responsible. We are nonprofits, so at the end of the day, we're not using the tax dollars to support the games, but we very much understand that everything that we're doing to the city and with the city benefits and also affects the city, right? And so we want to make sure that Angelinos are proud, and we want to make sure that what we're doing here is only going to create more opportunities for all of the businesses and the people that actually
right.
live in LA. And so that's sort of where we're at today. But if you're saying that other North Star in terms of like as a marketer, the North Star would truly be that people remember us as like one of the more culturally relevant games, right? We're actually got the vibes, we're cool, like we really represent that aspect of LA. And I think it's hard to say now, but I'm hoping a couple years later, somebody could be like, I really liked what they did there, right?
Right.
Wow, it was really cool that they actually did that for, the games. I can remember the opening ceremony. So if those conversations happen, I think we all win. But it can't be just be about how many followers we have on social or how many people we get to work with. I think all of them are pretty unique and interesting all around.
I don't mean to put your CFO hat on. However, doesn't LA have a leg up on the competition because of the, crypto.com and USC and UCLA and all the different professional sports teams, SoFi, right? And I think in other cities, they had to build so many of these complexes, pools, etc., right? From scratch. Doesn't that give LA like just a huge head start on being able to be potentially the most profitable games?
Yeah, so part of the bidding process is that we put that into part of
Yeah,
that bid, right? That proposal shows, hey, by the way, we don't actually have to build any new infrastructure in order to host the games. And frankly, that's probably the reason why we won the bid, is because this is probably the first time a city is able to host the games without actually building any additional infrastructure. So we're
that's a
basically
huge
made
part. Yeah,
made for it, right?
yeah.
And so we are, I'm sure there's going to be a bit of support here and there in terms of fixing certain infrastructures and things like that. But we're working very closely with all the venues and the actual infrastructure of LA to kind of make that happen.
What have you looking back at and when you look at like you just mentioned Rio, London, I mean Tokyo was a little bit of a different situation because obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic, but what are some of the I guess learnings that you've taken from those different games over the last like three different iterations that you want to learn from and kind of take to the next level and or maybe avoid some of the turbulence that comes with marketing PR, getting the word
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah. So part of the games, we have these like milestones that we have to hit. So there's like every games, there's these specific things that you need to do so that we kind of check things off. And they are
Mhm.
like the foundations of what putting on a games looks like. But I think what most people don't realize is that the organizing committee acts as a startup. So we actually have to create our own infrastructure. We have to hire the right people. We have to develop what our mission, vision, and goals are, and then develop the marketing plan to accompany it. We also decide when we decide to actually have a mascot or like put tickets on sale and things like that. So there's recommendations, but
Got it.
that's not something that, is defined by the IOC. It's truly on the organizing
Mm.
committee. So because of that, it makes things a lot more interesting because the Olympics been
I'm sure
around
a
for
lot of
so
consultants are
long.
involved.
Yeah, but the
Yeah,
games have been around for so long, and so in order for them to sort of evolve, they created this structure so that the LA games can make it LA, can make
got
it
it.
2028, right? And make it extremely relevant the way we want to make it versus them saying, hey, by the way, this needs to be this way going forward, right? And so it's truly a collaborative effort. And I would say one of the interesting elements is, social has continued to transform the games in a very different way. Most people in the past, they've watched the games on TV broadcast and that's it, right? But if a games is, or in the US, if it's international, you can't watch it at 3 or 4
Yep.
a.m.
Yep.
Diehards will, but the casual fans won't be able to. But the issue that we have today is that fans can wake up 7 a.m., 6 a.m., and they see all of the
Mhm.
records, all of the highlights on
The
the
old
social
tape
already.
delay conundrum,
It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
And so because of that, we very much need to understand like where do we play at? How do we, make sure fans continue to get engaged, even though they know they can just scroll and get the info,
Well,
right? What are the other areas that we can give them more information?
can you learn anything from the binge like Netflix model, right? Because there's, when you look at, some of these famous TV shows out there, where obviously if you binge it, I guess the spoiler alerts, right? And
Yeah.
there's how do you market a program like Stranger Things or what have you? But that's a little bit different because they're coming out weekly. But Ozark, for instance, on Netflix, I can watch a whole season in one night, but on social media, they still have to continue to like market that. So is that a way you can attack, the whole tape delay, 3 in the morning thing, or how do you even
I
think about it?
I think it's greater storytelling. I think the
Okay.
biggest thing is we've done a lot of research and we've asked fans, like, what do you want to know, right?
Yeah.
Besides the fact that that person got a gold medal, ran the
Mhm.
fastest, swam the fastest, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what else? Because the interesting part of this is even if you're talking about Stranger Things or some of these series,
Yeah.
there's like a full storyline. The
It's
harder
true.
part about the storylines here is that every 4 years, technically every 2 years, winter and summer games,
It's different.
there's different people every year.
Mhm.
There are some that've been there, right? The Simone Biles and like,
Yeah.
the others that you continue to follow and you're like, "Ooh, I really hope." But I think it's because there's social media now that allows fans to be like, "Oh, not only can I follow Simone Biles, I can also follow her coach. I can follow her husband.
Yeah.
We can follow Paris and
Well,
LA28 to get, different tidbits
good,
about this
good.
person."
A good example of that more recently is Coco Gauff. I mean, so many of us didn't watch that live, but the mom's reaction in the stands, and obviously
Absolutely.
her appreciating those that came before her, and just like the whole story that
Hmm.
she had. That's like a perfect example of like the
Yeah.
storytelling that continued not only the day after, but weeks after the event.
100%.
Yeah.
And then you have a New Balance, right, who's her sponsor, who also adds to her story
Right. Right.
where now she's a champion. So it's amazing.
I'm going to circle back, obviously, to LA28 and Olympics, but I wanted to kind of go back to just overall marketing because you have so many impressive stops across your resume. I noticed one thing, kind of researching you, that you always speak about is you really love and enjoy the who and the why behind the brand. That's kind of what geeks you out or gets you up in the morning. So walk me through that. Where did you find that love, and what's that mean to you?
So, for me, I've always been interested, and a brand can be anything, right? We have a brand, you have a brand, and then there's companies that have brands. And the biggest thing that differentiates one brand to another is truly who that person is and what they represent, right? And who's that voice that's behind the brand. And so it's certain brands, you see them once, you experience it, and then you kind of move on because there's nothing that's nostalgic or nothing that keeps you connected with that brand. Whereas other brands, you're like, oh, I'm going to keep coming back. I'm really interested in what they have. It connects with who I am. And so I think part of any brand that sort of have this who and the what and their why, and they can continuously, authentically do that across the board, no matter how big they grow or how long that brand exists. That's how you truly grow that fan base. And that could be an artist to, like the Olympic Games.
Well, it's funny too, because I mean, this maybe it's too soon, so stop me if I'm going down a bad path. But with the Sixers, they kind of create a brand of trust the process, right? Like that was their whole thing.
That's
And I
right.
saw an interview with Doc Rivers a couple months ago, he said that still is very much a part of the organization. It's been tough to kind of like move into that next era. So
Yeah.
that it's so important to like understand the why, the core values, where we're going, where we're headed, and everybody in the organization kind of has to drive towards that. Or you find yourself trying to do a little bit of, crisis PR, I guess, later on in the process.
And deep down, like inside baseball, whatever we
Yeah.
call it. But
Yeah.
76ers truly is a really good organization. Like they
Mhm.
genuinely believe in all their mission, goals, values, and they do it on a day-to-day basis, which I can't continue to say that enough. It's
Yeah.
one of those areas that yes, it was a stop on my journey, but there's no doubt that, if I ever wanted to consider to go back, I certainly would.
I
It
love
just
it.
has that they really take care of their people and making sure that it's not just the players, right? It's the fans, the players, the staff, the employees. So when we talk about the who, it's all
Yeah.
stakeholders are we're fully bought in to trust the process. And they're still trusting it.
I
So,
love it. I love it.
mhm.
What do you think most that being said, I think part of the answer will probably be that, but what do you think most brands get wrong when they're trying to talk to their audience, when they're trying to decide who they are in the marketplace?
I think they try too hard and they haven't defined, right, like who their real audiences are. And I know it's hard, right? Because you're like, wait, if Gen Z is my audience, but I'm getting a lot of millennials and Gen X, et cetera, then what do I do, right? But if you stay true to your core, I'm not saying you never pivot, but if you stay true to your core, then that's going to be where you win. And I think that's the part where there's this healthy balance between certain brands that might be trying to sell a product versus a brand that's really trying to connect with a certain audience to do something, right? And so it depends on what the end goal is. But if you're trying to just reach an audience, then you just have to stay true to who you are. And I think a lot of brands, they try to pivot too many times because they're like,
Yeah.
oh, well, no, that's where the audiences are. So we got to go there. That's not always true. And so you got to spend the time and the effort to really build that audience.
One thing I found too is I think what I've found throughout my career is people get too close to the brand and they also think that they're the audience. And well, I don't like that, so we shouldn't do that. Or that doesn't really make sense to me. Like this meme could be made by intern. Yeah, but your audience like will laugh at that meme. Um, have you seen that? Like, I guess my question to you is how important is it to have the demographic of the audience that you're actually speaking to be on your team?
I think it's so important.
Yeah.
I have to say, the folks on my team are particularly younger, and that's across the board on in every
Right.
role that I have been, and it's on purpose, right? Because when we say what's trending, what's
Right.
out there, what are the folks talking about, what's cool, like they know. And
Mhm.
so if I'm gonna sit there and try to act like I know everything, it's just never gonna work,
Yeah.
right? And so I mean, sure, they keep us young, right? They continue to show us why certain things aren't cool anymore. We don't do this and do that. But I always try to make sure in order for if we're seeing that a particular audience is your target audience, then they should be the people that are working behind the brand. And that's critical.
I love getting the different definitions from my guest on this question, which is how do you define the difference between sales and marketing?
So for me, sales is transactional. You're going to sell something, somebody likes it, they're going to buy it. Cool. Marketing is packaging it all together, giving the why to whatever the product is so that you're buying it, but then like what are the features, the benefits, and all of that.
I interviewed recently on the podcast Jeff Finster. He's the CEO of Everbowl, and he used to run an agency with Neil Patel. And I liked what he said here. He said they had a goal of 8 for them, 2 for us, like 8 pieces of valuable content, educational, informative, the
Yeah.
feels content, and then we can now we have the equity with our audience to then ask for something at the end of it. I find a lot of brands almost do the opposite, where they're constantly call to action, call to action, call to action. So how do you find that balance with LA28 and throughout your career when it comes to the split between creating valuable content versus like obviously moving them down that funnel?
Yeah, I think so. Right now, so every role that I've been in, there's a lot of different clients all together. So they all have different KPIs. So
Yeah.
I'll just say the most recent with LA28, right? The current moment right now, the KPIs are tied to fan acquisition, really just driving like email acquisition, right?
Mm,
Because or you could throw in like social media followers and things like that, but genuinely it is just to continue to make enough noise and positive noise so that we're continuing to reach Angelinos and beyond, right? The beyond is gonna expand very quickly going into next year. And so that's important because knowing sort of where we are at today, any strategy that we put together, I always try to make sure that it's to me it's a 7-3 rule. So there's almost if you think about a 10 piece of content,
yeah.
7 pieces of content is all about storytelling and like, and then out of the next three, frankly, two of them is more fun things.
Okay.
And then your last is call to action. But the only reason why this matrix, if you will, for us right now works is because we really don't have anything to technically
Right.
sell, right?
Right.
Like, so if I'm always asking people to sign up for something, but I can only offer you one email a month, right?
Yeah.
Like that's nothing that, really requires that. And so to me, it's almost like we're building the friendship right now. And as we're building this friendship, we're going to do some things together. We're going to have some
Yep.
experiences together. And then eventually, hopefully, we'll be best friends. And as we're becoming best friends, then let's go and watch, experience the games
Yep.
together. So that's kind of how I see
I
sort
love
of
that.
the different touch points.
I'm curious again because I'm fascinated with like the 5 years out like roadmap. So if you're trying to acquire emails in this phase of the marketing plan, how do you incentivize? How do you say what's the value? I guess the value prop to get people to say, you know what, yes, here's my email. I'd love to hear more from you.
So the value prop, there's a combination of things, right? You'll be the first to know whenever there's new news. You'll be the first to know when tickets are on sale,
Yeah.
mascot launches, et cetera,
So
et
the
cetera.
FOMO part of it is big.
Correct.
Yeah.
Very big. And then the other component of it is and usually it would be like the diehard fans that are following us, right? And so they're like, oh, okay, of course I need to know what's happening.
Yeah.
But then the casual fan, I think the matrix is more on the actual social platforms, right? Like, oh, okay, I saw really fun content that's on LA28. Cool. I'm actually surprised that they actually have a channel. And we get that a lot on TikTok. Like we have all of our TikTok followers are always like, oh my God, why do you even have a channel? Like, let Paris 2024 go first. Like, let them finish.
Let them
And
live.
it's funny because they'll try to start trouble between the two, but we're friends. But that's great, right? Like, that's the banter that we
Engagement's
would love to
engagement.
have.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So feel free, say what you need to say. We are here for it, and we love to engage with our fans.
So, speaking to a Gen Z audience, I know that you've worked with creators, influencers, people that have that equity, especially I'm sure in the LA market. I read a stat. I mean, I think at least 37% of at least paid content is performing better when it's more creator led, right? And face forward content. So, walk me through how you've been able to use. We talked about the artists earlier too, but how you've used creators with your content as well to kind of build that fandom.
Yeah. Well, so the good part about the Olympics and Paralympics is that you almost have a like full group of individuals that are automatic influencers, right? Some of them, especially if they're, I would say, in the moment right now, they understand that in order to create their brand, they have to have social media presence.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so having these Olympians and the Paralympians, they're athletes. We're not saying we're quote unquote like just doing things for free, but like, how do we find opportunities where we provide it for them, right? So that they can actually authentically be a part of a campaign that we're doing or participating in an event that we're hosting. And so that they can also create content on their own channels or we can create content with each other. And so that's like one group of audience that makes it very authentic and very easy to kind of play around with. But when it comes to the external influencers or ambassadors, that's where we need to be really strategic, right? There are individuals who might have ties with the sports that that are part of our games. And so if their athletes are participating in those sports, they are also potentially inclined to be potential influencers of
Yeah.
ours. Then there's others that are creators, they're artists, they're entertainers. They might not be the one-on-one when it comes to a true Olympic fan, but those are the people that are going to make us culturally relevant. They're
Right.
the ones that are
Right.
tastemakers. And so we also want to make sure that we have ways to collaborate with them. And frankly, our emblem platform would be a perfect opportunity to even start that conversation and engage with them, because how cool would it be that they can actually create their own A? I wish I could have my A. Like, we don't even have that. So, we'll see. We got 5 years
uh,
for that.
I love it. Put your, I guess, in the future cap on, if that makes sense. There's going to be something 5 years from now that probably doesn't even exist now. We've seen the emergence of these different platforms. We've seen obviously what AI has done, but is there anything that you're kind of predicting? Like, hey, I know this isn't a thing now, team, but I'm telling you, 5 years from now, when we're getting ready to cover the games, we got to be ready for blank.
Yeah. So the hard answer, the simple answer is that we try everything. So anything that comes online that it's
Yeah.
like, oh, that's kind of interesting. NFTs, right? Any
Mhm.
of that, AR, VR, like, you bet we are in there. We have a group of individuals on the team that actually like focuses on like doing the research, figuring it out, and being a good tester. Like, that's the
Right.
thing about us, is that we're never too keen to be like, we know everything and this is the only thing that we're going to do. We're going to go test everything out. If there's one area that I'm really intrigued about, would be something like a Discord. So it's
Yeah.
there, but like, what does that mean from a music perspective? What does that look like? Because there's music kind of runs through a lot of different areas where athletes are able to kind of curate their own like playlist so that they can like be prepared to actually compete and etc. And then music also, is sets the tone for what the brand has to offer. And so I think
Yeah.
there's going to be something unique there that I'm just using Discord as an example, but I think there's going to be something that's a little bit more unique in the future that's coming, that might, bring MySpace back, that like brings it a
Yeah.
little bit more new. So we'll see. We'll see
I
how it
love it.
goes.
I'm with you too. I think, really what I always recommend is play in the sandbox. Like, Threads comes out. We don't know how this thing's going to continue to rise, but get an account, play around a little bit, get some followers. I do think what I see is a lot of people think they need the 78-page strategy playbook signed off by 12 executives. And by that time, you're 6 months too late. But I love what
Right.
you said there. It's like, well, we have self-awareness. We don't have an ego. We'll try everything. And then if it doesn't really provide value, we'll kind of stop doing it for a while, but always open to retry it. I love that advice for sure.
Yeah. But it's funny you say about a strategy. Like, trust me, we definitely try to create a strategy deck, but that's where we always compete.
Yeah.
Different groups all have strategy decks, and us too, but I always try to make sure, like, give me 20%, 20% out of the 100%. We have to be able to just be open and just try things. Like, if it
Yeah.
makes sense, we're just going to go ahead and do it. And we're early enough that truly, most of the things that we're
Yeah.
doing, there's strong calculated risks. Like, it's going to be fine, right? Like, it's supposed to be fun. And that's, part of the project.
I always joke around like, remember Nike, like their first 5 TikTok posts? No, nobody does.
Yeah.
So yeah, play in that sandbox. And when you can A/B test things, that strategy is so much better when you could say, hey, we've posted 29 pieces of content. Here's what seems to be working with the
Yep.
audience and can hit the bullseye better there. What's the split, I guess, for you, LA28 in particular, I guess, United States versus global? Is it equal, or is it mostly focused on United States? Like, how do you look at that?
So right now it's mostly the US,
Okay.
frankly, even mostly LA, California, but mostly LA. Just because if you think about the timeline of everything, we need to make sure that the US is good with us, right? We want to make sure that LA is cool with us, right?
Yeah.
As soon as the world kind of comes in, the biggest group of people that are going to feel that effect and impact is the local Angelinos. And so that's why it's
Mhm.
so important for us that no matter what we do externally, right, as we're continuing to reach larger audiences, that we don't forget our true, tried and true, and that is our Angelinos. But going into handover next year for Paris, that's going to extend that. And so there's going to be a lot more global attention that's going to come towards us. And then international, we always try to actually anchor on the Olympics, the IOC, as well the IPC, because they are truly the international
Yeah.
organizing committee, right?
Yeah.
And so for them, they're able to already connect. And they know which countries, right, are have higher propensity to actually engage with the Olympic brand. And so instead of us trying to, do too much, too wide, we can strategically focus in on different countries and categories across the world.
Yeah, and I'm sure too, I don't know what the stats are, but as far as like attendance as well for the games, I mean, the majority of those people probably come with a 4-hour radius of the event.
Yeah. I don't have the full breakdown right now, but there's
Yeah.
definitely a good balance
But
between
I'm
the
sure,
US
I
and
guess my point
international.
is making sure you saturate here and then work your way out instead of trying
Exactly.
to, like we said earlier, be everything to everybody. I'm kind of fascinated with, I guess, this handover. So as we go into Paris for 2024, I would love to hear from you. Um, Obviously, that's an event. There's the official handover, which is like the torch and all that. But
Right.
now in this digital and social world, it's like, hey, here you guys go. Now you got next, essentially, which doesn't usually happen in our marketing world, I think, on a day to day. So, how does that all work? And I guess how excited are you to go through that process?
Yeah, we're right in the process of planning right now, so we're really excited about it. I think when you kind of look back at the years of summer games, you have 2012 where, Facebook was really the biggest like medium, right? There's a little
Yeah.
bit of Twitter that was there. And then you have 2016, and 2016 it was in Rio. And so things were just still happening, and I think obviously Instagram was already on, but it was still very much focused on like TV, broadcast, streaming, etc. Then you go to 2020, which could have been the moment, right? The
Yes.
moment. However, obviously, with the pandemic,
Mhm.
the digital space definitely became a source of information and data and truth. But at the same time, it didn't really allow, I think, any brands to like truly build out like, what does that look like? What is, from Tokyo to Paris? How does that work? How do you do something like that online? Because if you recognize this, anybody that followed Tokyo 2020, I don't even think their Instagram or their Facebook is on anymore. Like
Yeah,
that's
of
it, right?
course.
Because the
Right.
game's over. But at the same time, when you can also transition or transfer your fans over, it's kind of like letting the fans know, hey, the next part of this journey is now our friends in Paris. And so Paris will also have that moment with us. And so Paris and LA28 are looking to kind of create this digital storytelling sort of transition of fans,
Like it.
but also a handshake, right? Like, hey, I know you followed a bunch of these athletes, and and some of them are really exciting. Their next journey is going to be our games. And so, having fans also have that opportunity to sort of continue their fandom, I think it's a really unique experience, and hopefully we'll do something really cool with it.
Logistically, is it just like now go follow at LA28 games or like what is
Bare
the
minimum, that's probably it.
okay?
But hopefully we'll be able to do a little bit more than.
I like that. And I'm sure you can even like uh dark posts and different things where you can like talk to that audience in a
Yeah.
creative way.
Yeah.
So I like
Mm-hmm.
that. I would love to get some overall thoughts, like rapid fire here as we kind of wrap up things. But any brands, accounts, creators that you enjoy following on social media, or you think they would do a really good job of being authentic to their audience
So
outside
there's
of
there's a couple
okay.
that comes up to mind. Instagram and TikTok in particular. So there's this girl named Kate Max. She's a running interviewer, and I really love what she does because she you can tell she's starting to get bigger and bigger. But she's a runner, and she goes and she tags different influencers, creators, or just people on the street as she's trying to showcase it, and they just go for a run and they just chat about life. And I think,
Hmm.
it's something very easy, very simple. And I'm sure she's a fantastic runner. But for her to use this mechanism to be able to connect with different people and share stories, I think it's done really well. I think each video is not that long, maybe under 1 minute, so 60 seconds. But you're able to kind of get to know different people through that.
It's kind of
Um,
that comedians in cars getting coffee or carpool karaoke type
yeah,
vibe, right?
I
That
love
theme
people that
works
are.
so well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the thing is, they're very authentic. They continue to do stuff that just is true to who they are. The other person that I love following is his name is Devin Rodriguez, and he's in New York City. He's an artist from the Bronx who's kind of known for drawing portraits of individuals who are riding the
Mhm.
subway. And
I've
I
seen
know
this.
he's
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so like even somebody like, him, where, very simple, just, could have just been an artist, maybe just drawing some pictures, and for him to kind of create an entire social following on that, and then now expanding to, I think has his own exhibition right now, really showed like how he's like authentically being himself and using an art form. So I like to follow a lot of like these type of individuals
Yeah.
because I think they're the most organic, and the way they tell stories and the way they, might edit their videos, it isn't always the most professionalized way. And
That's all
I
good.
like that. I don't think we need to professionalize every piece of content that's out
No.
there, and keep things as organic as need to be. I
Yeah.
also love Dude with a Sign.
And especially throughout what we see too, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, I've been talking about on the podcast a lot, is that lo-fi content is performing so much better, going so much more viral, and comes
100%.
across so much more authentic than anything that looks linear in nature usually tends to underperform for sure.
Exactly.
Um, any book, podcast, newsletter that you consume or enjoy that gives you value to be a better marketer?
Ooh. You know what's funny? I love to listen to a lot of other podcasts that have nothing to do with marketing on purpose,
Interesting.
because I want to hear how they tell stories, and I want to hear how they market whatever they're marketing. So, for example, I listen to something like So Money with Farnoosh Torabi, right? She's always talking about, different financial opportunities. She brings in different guests, but she's also a columnist, and also like, she speaks on all of these topics that people are uncomfortable about money. But then I also listen to like Road Tripping with like RJ and Channing.
Yeah.
And so like that's more on the sports side. I purposely do that because the day to day is always marketing, and I'm always
Yeah.
sharing content with my team. We're always talking about marketing. So whenever I get a chance to go and listen to all of these other types of topics, I think that helps me kind of figure out like what are areas that, we can do better, right, on
I
how we
like
tell
that.
our
I like that
story.
advice. I feel like I'm just all in on marketing and business podcasts, and it's a lot, like maybe need a break from that.
Yeah.
I would love to also get your thoughts on, so many people, and we get this all the time from our clients and prospects. We want to reach Gen Z. We want to be more authentic with the Gen Z audience, which I know is an area you play in every single day. So if you could give one piece of advice for people that are trying to get younger, try to be more authentic to that audience, what are some things that you've seen, or what's like the number one piece of advice you would give to make sure people stay focused on to at least start that journey?
I think I've said this so many times throughout the whole podcast, but definitely be authentic, but
Yeah.
definitely check in with them, right? Like if you're going to have a piece of content that, or like a whole series of content, check that by the audience. Like
Yeah.
literally, it's not that difficult, because they can see through when things just become
Yeah.
too overly processed or produced, and things that just seems very forced.
Yeah.
And as we know, this new generation, they very much have a voice. They literally grew up with social media, and so I think it's really important to make sure that they're the ones that are telling you whether this is good stuff or
Right.
not.
Right.
Um, and
They're
then
the immediate focus group, right?
correct,
Yeah.
correct. And then I think the other part of this is, as you're kind of tapping into like, the Gen Z audiences, is realizing there's actually two parts of the Gen Z audience. There's actually the older Gen Z audience that are actually in college, right? They're going to be spenders. If they're not spending money today, they
Right.
very much will be very soon. And
Yep.
then you have those that are like a much younger, where they're not making their own decisions. Maybe they think they are, but they're not fully, on social media accounts, but they're
'Cause I think
watching.
right now it's 12 to 25 is like the range of 26.
Correct.
So
And so it's
12-year-old compared to 26, yeah, it's different.
it's a big difference.
Yeah.
And that's the part where, for us, there's a portion of our stuff that's very tapped into sort of the older Gen Z.
Yeah.
And then there's areas that we also touch with the younger, but the younger folks, we always try to be a bit careful, because the reality is there's just so many things that are going on, and they're not truly the actual decision makers, right? It's really their parents. And so we try
Right.
to balance that out as well.
I would also love to get your advice. I know you're super passionate, just for women, Asian Americans, and leadership. For folks out there that are trying to ascend to heights like yourself, what advice do you give different folks in the industry?
So just a quick, background. Like personally, I chose to be in the sports industry because I didn't see a lot of myself, right? Not being an Asian American woman, especially when, 15 years ago, like that is just
Yeah.
not a job or a career that I would say our family members ever understood. Um, and so I would say, even though, sports industry sounds extremely sexy and fun and like, all of that fun stuff, there is that, but you truly need to like understand, like, is this really for you, and is this
Yeah.
business for you? Regardless of your personal like identity, like I want to make sure that people truly go into a field that they are really passionate about, because you can go in here and understand all of the stats and you can still not be a great marketer because that has nothing to do with marketing, right? And so I think it's less about just
Yeah.
like a person's identity. But with that being said, once you are carrying yourself in the industry that you're in, making sure that you continue to stand out. And there's no doubt, I mean, in all my previous roles, I've always been one of the, I guess, top individuals in the organization that is a woman
Yeah.
or an Asian American, and that truly does make me stand out. I'm also extremely tall, not extremely, but a bit taller than most, and so because of that,
Wait, how tall are
I
you?
I love
Now I have to know.
it. I'm 5'10", so I'm not
Oh, wow.
extremely tall,
Okay.
but I'm tall, and I'm
Awesome.
probably tall for an Asian. So there's always a presence there, right? No matter what, but I love it, and I'm just going to continue to anchor on it, because that's what makes you who you are, and people should really tap into that.
Well, and I think when I talk to my friends about this subject, like it's just so imperative to see somebody in leadership or see somebody that's doing the thing you ultimately want to do as an example, right? And like that provides so much inspiration, so much, oh, I can do it too, which sounds like is a big driver for why you wanted to continue to ascend in this industry overall, is to be that example for the next generation too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. And then I would love, I guess, to end the show, I guess, when it comes to LA28, like what's the most exciting thing or the thing that you're looking most forward to, whether it's like a month from now or as we look 5 years from today?
There's going to be a couple of big announcements coming up
Okay.
in the in
You
the
may want
coming
to sign up
months.
for the newsletter to be the first to know,
Definitely
FOMO.
sign up. You'll be the first to know. There's
I
no
love
doubt
it.
about that.
I
But
love it.
there's some big
Mm,
stories that'll pop up. It's about our sports program, so it'll round out our
great.
official sports program for LA28. And then we will also share the full scope of what the games will look like for all of the different venues. And
I
so
love that.
there's sort of the games venues announcement. So that's all coming up very shortly. And
Like where the
then there's
opening ceremony will be held and all those
correct,
different things. Yeah.
right. Like the actual official news. I think a lot
My
of
money, my
rumors
money
are
has
out
it on
there.
SoFi, but I won't ever
So
speak
bye.
on names. That's where my money's at.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
But then there's also handover. So I hope people stay tuned to the Paris 2024 games.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all the knowledge that you drop on the listeners, and super exciting stuff. I can't wait. I feel like it was like 10 years away. Now it's only 5 years away. So it's coming
Yeah. Thank you
for the
so much. It's
division.
been so fun. I hope we'll be able to continue to check in soon.
For sure. Thanks, Olivia. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. All right. Thank you so much to Olivia for joining us on the Business Social Podcast. As always, our guests are usually always dropping some amazing knowledge and value. As I bring on our producer, Kayla Simmons, one thing that really stuck out to me as I kind of talked about the eight for them, two for us approach that Jeff Finster taught us a couple interviews ago, was how she talked about her marketing matrix of that seven are kind of storytelling, two are more fun and engaging, and one is that call to action. And currently, 5 years out, their number one goal is simply just to get emails so they can, start to get people into their audience and kind of work them down that funnel. So I don't know. I thought that was super interesting how the different lanes of marketing, the different segments of marketing as you're so far out from the ultimate event.
No, yeah, that was really super interesting. Definitely a lot of hindsight planning, which they're definitely ahead of the core. I really liked when she talked about just like staying true to your audience and how clear they are, like even so far out. It's really cool to see.
My bet is SoFi will be the opening ceremony. You'll see people over at where the Lakers play at Crypto. At that time, at that point, the new Clippers stadium will already be built. You have USC, UCLA. You have the baseball stadiums. I mean, there's a lot of places that they can again, that's why I think if they're going to be the first ever, not first ever, but at least in the WoW, the first ever profitable games, they have the opportunity to do that because they don't have to build so much infrastructure. There's different, I know like Rio, they just like built all these hotels and built all these like state of the art, pool decks. And then they just like never used them again. It just like went, that's crazy. So it's cool to see what LA has in store, and was so cool to really peek behind the curtain. And we'll talk to Olivia more as we get closer to the games too, because I think it'll be interesting to see the different phases of marketing and kind of follow her and her journey over the next, really honestly 5 years or so. But I can't wait. It's going to be here before we know it. Watching hopefully the dream team at that point play at crypto.com in downtown LA. All right. So thanks so much once again to Olivia. Thanks to KDO for all her help on the technical side. Thanks to you, Kayla, of course, for all your help producing the program. And thanks to you for listening. This has been yet another edition of the Business Social Podcast. It's all been powered by STN Digital.